I think it is safe to say that no social system in human history has unanimously guaranteed people's health, well-being, safety, or liberty. The feudal lords of the Middle Ages had responsibility over their steads and kingdoms, and yet poverty and sickness were rife within them. The first industrial revolution brought about what we would call early modern capitalism, and while the standard of living rose significantly for the few, many still found themselves in hunger and squalor. Of course, there are alternatives. What started as a noble revolution to establish a new social order in semi-feudal Russia ended as an oppressive totalitarian regime. And of course, there were societies that functioned not on any benevolent guiding principles, but on brutal hatred and intolerance. Now don't get me wrong, the state of the world today is country miles better than in the past century or so. More people than ever have access to basic necessities. We haven't had a world war in 70 years, and slowly but surely, we are weaning ourselves off of polluting energy sources. But despite all this, is it enough? 21st century capitalism is riddled with so many problems, and that makes some wonder why it's still the leading economic system. Most clean energy initiatives have been either carried out by national governments or through private companies bankrolled by government subsidy. Dirty fuel sources are still very profitable. Because of business owners' focus on short-term gain, not much care is taken to ensure that workers are treated with dignity, are paid well enough to survive, that they can provide for themselves and have the will to be more productive, as this would chip in to the capitalist's bottom line. Allow me to repeat, it's profitable for businesses to neglect their employees that keep the business afloat, and so this has a disastrous impact on the well-being of the many who work day in, day out. Advertising and market trends have created a voracious culture of consumerism that has not only eroded our social fabric, but has also contributed to the decline of the world's ecosystems. Corporations have caught onto this behaviour and have adapted in an alarming way. By implementing the unsustainable practice of planned obsolescence into their business models, products are no longer built to last. They're built to become waste. How much waste? A lot. In fact, over 20 million tons of electronic waste are disposed of every year. Where does this end up? In landfills and trash heaps. Precious resources are wasted this way, and our planet gets polluted because of it. Yet, big businesses like Apple just sit along by, releasing new phones every year with only incremental upgrades from the last, ignoring the issue of industrial waste almost entirely. As another example, planned obsolescence is also rife within the auto industry, which is famous for generating huge amounts of waste, characterized by heaps of old automobiles we often see in scrapyards. And of course, we can't talk about waste without talking about food and agriculture. It is estimated that we currently produce enough food to provide for 10 billion people. Yet, 30% of it goes to waste, and millions around the world living in abject poverty still don't have enough to eat. From the conditions and observations I have previously brought attention to, I can from here make the conclusion that our current socio-economic paradigm is inefficient, it is unsustainable, and it is detrimental to the health and well-being of the people as well as the world we live on. So what are the alternatives? We could try a socialist dictatorship of the proletariat-style government. Would that work? Well, shortly after the Russian Revolution, the Soviet Workers' Councils were dismantled and a lot of the country's powers were centralized, which was derived from Lenin and later Stalin being power-hungry. The nation ended up as a totalitarian state where people had little rights or liberties, and that's not in any way desirable. What about the Nordic model? The Nordic model of social democracy does have its merits: more rigid democracy, better healthcare, more rigorous environmental standards, and so on and so forth. However, it still doesn't override the unsustainable nature of capitalism, which renders social democracy as more of a band-aid to the problems we face more than anything else. So what do I suggest? I, as well as organisations like the Venus Project, the Zeitgeist Movement, Ubuntu Planet, and others, call for a new socio-economic paradigm called a natural law resource-based economy. This is a society where all of the Earth's resources are declared the common heritage of mankind, and we arrive at this with the reasoning that we all live on this Earth, and thus in order to survive as a species, we must share its fruits. In an RBE, there is no money, no debt, no barter or trade, and there is no property ownership. Instead, RBE advocates propose a system of free access, where people can access all the things they need, but no one specifically owns anything. So how would we facilitate the system of free access? We would intelligently manage resources and use the latest and greatest technologies to bring about an access abundance of goods and services through what is called a resource management system. This system, a decentralized network of supercomputers making use of Internet of Things technology and the blockchain, will catalog and distribute resources to those who need them in the most efficient and sustainable ways possible. It will autonomously manage mining operations, recycling plants, and so on and so forth. On the topic of recycling, one of the major ways we would arrive at the abundance of resources is through the intelligent management of waste. We must recognise that everything and anything can be used as a resource, and so it is important to manage our waste effectively so we can get those resources back into the supply network. We can ensure an abundance of food and energy through a variety of methods, such as hydro and aeroponics, vertical farms, and in vitro meat and dairy food production, and renewables and eventually nuclear fusion for energy production, with carbon battery storage. That was just a few examples of the tip of the iceberg for methods of generating material abundance, and so I'll probably do a series covering these methods individually. In essence, a resource-based economy is a logical conclusion to our social and economic problems through decisions arrived at using the scientific method. Instead of decisions being made according to how much profit they would lead to, decisions are arrived at through the objective analysis of what can create the best conditions for the world's people and ecosystems. Resource-based economies are arrived at through the holistic and all-encompassing thought processes that take into account all factors of our existence, including ourselves, our communities, and our shared ecosphere. RBE advocates, myself included, assume the philosophy of environmental determinism, as in, people's behaviours are inherently tied to their social and physical environment. Although many would disagree, I believe this is a well-founded philosophy, since it has been observed in Paleolithic humans as well as in the animal kingdom. An example of this being in the case of bonobos, chimpanzees, and the Congo River, which I will go over more detail. In my next video, I will cover some of the most common criticisms of resource-based economies, and will attempt to falsify some of them, and in addition clear up some misconceptions about them as well. I hope you enjoyed this informative video. If you want to see more of what I have to say, and want to learn more about resource-based economies, please share this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.